Seeing as how I started this channel going over Monster Hunter World, it seems only fitting I continue this by reviewing Capcom's latest iteration of the series, Monster Hunter Rise. That said, I will do my best to limit direct comparisons to the prior for the sake of a fair review, but there will arise some situations that warrant it, so keep that in mind. Monster Hunter Rise arrives as the first original Monster Hunter title for the Nintendo Switch, which at the time has only an enhanced re-release of a prior title called Monster Hunter Generations, which is not in itself a bad game, but a little dated, and was all the Switch had while Monster Hunter World grabbed the title of the best-selling game Capcom has ever made. But now, the Switch has the follow-up to that best-selling title, which contains the modern upgrades of its predecessor, whilst having its own unique style and its own unique game feel. You begin as a newly promoted hunter who has been given the task of protecting their beloved home of Kimura, a relatively small village that is soaked in the fantasy feudal Japanese theme that you'll find permeates every aspect of the game. You're introduced to this right off the bat with the village's traditional looking buildings and stalls, the ninja, samurai, and shrine maiden styled main cast, and background tracks that heighten these thematics even further. You'll also find that everyone here knows your name, and they are all expecting you to rise to greatness, taking on the threats that lurk just outside the village gates. These threats are, of course, the monsters. A veritable hodgepodge of monsters, ranging from repeating favorites and obscure classics to brand new creatures. The variety is decent, at least once you pass the early game, which has a small pool of different monsters with obviously retextured models. Granted, they do have varied movesets, but not so much that the fights against them play out all that different. After that point, however, you'll be going up against the real monsters, the ones that have their own style and their own special moves or unique mechanics you have to deal with. With these monsters, you'll come out of a fight saying, "Dang, that was really fun." And the new monsters created specifically for this game also contain that same Japanese charm, with their designs inspired from the Oni and Yokai from Japanese folklore. Not only that, but every monster also gets a personalized intro sequence based off a Japanese theatrical performance known as kabuki. Once you're tasked with fighting these beasts, you'll find the game plays quite differently depending on what weapon you're using at the time. There are 14 different weapon types in Monster Hunter Rise, 3 ranged and 11 melee, but each and every one is going to present a unique experience, as the openings they provide and the tactics you can use around each one are very different. The Greatsword, for instance, has these massive damaging hits, but swings so slow that you need to pick and choose the place and time to unleash your strongest attacks, or else you are going to get blasted mid-swing, or more likely do a full swing straight into the ground. The bow, on the other hand, lets you fire off a constant stream of arrows that allows you to keep the damage consistent, but the shooting isn't an easy, mindless, one-button weapon. You are constantly draining stamina while you fire off arrows, leading to a playstyle where you are skirting the edge between doing as much damage as possible, but trying to leave enough stamina to dodge out of the way of oncoming attacks. I personally used a lance. It's not the flashiest weapon, having only a few simple attacks, but the enjoyment of the weapon comes from how well you can block and counter each monster's moves. The better you get at learning the tells of each attack, the more you can unleash damage upon your foes, whereas other melee weapons will be waiting for their opportunity to step in. There are also 2 new additions to the Monster Hunter Rise moveset when compared to its direct predecessor. One is the addition of the Wirebug. This small bluish insect is capable of creating long strands of iron silk wires, which you'll be using in a few different ways. You're first introduced to it as a form of movement. Grapple hooks are something that's included in the toolset of Samurai and Ninja, so including them here help feed into that fantasy that Capcom is pushing in Monster Hunter Rise. But the added verticality is also something gaining in popularity in similarly themed games, like the Ghost of Tsushima or Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. The Wirebug here takes on the role of the grapple hook, but with way more freedom and expression of movement. You can slingshot yourself in any direction, hang in midair, and subsequently redirect a jump. You can pull yourself towards a wall and start running up it for as long as you have stamina, and there are big wire bugs in some places that will shoot you super long distances. With this freedom of movement, Capcom has also built locales that reward you for using that freedom. The different areas have little birds you can find that dole out stat buffs. You can find different endemic life that are used as tactical tools in a fight, like an exploding frog or a snail that creates a healing cloud, along with normal stuff like little collectibles and resources used for crafting. In more combative terms, the wire bug movement also has its place by adding a third dimension of movement to evasion, which traditionally is just running and dodge rolling, with some monster attacks clearly expecting you to utilize this feature. Wire bugs can also be used to effectively pull yourself out of the knockback after getting hit to create easy distance and give you some time to heal, but using this feature also cancels the invincibility you get after being tossed around, so mindlessly using this after getting hit may pull you directly into another attack rather than safety. Wire bugs also carry one other usage in battle. Each weapon comes with 2 Silkbind skills. These are flashy, specialized moves to be unleashed at just the right moment as they severely increase the cooldown on your wire bug usage. Some Silkbind skills can be as simple as an attack bonus, while others can add cool new attacks, compensate for a weapon's specific downsides, or add weapon-specific types of mobility. These limited-use skills aren't new to Monster Hunter, they've existed in previous titles, but here in Monster Hunter Rise, the wire bugs being a shared resource for different uses encourages a more risk and reward thought process between reserving your wire bugs for evasion or unleashing them offensively. The new monster riding feature also adds to this, as using the offensive wire bug attacks enough time on a monster makes them weary. They can then be wrangled and slammed into walls or used as a living weapon against the other monsters roaming the locales. Alongside these combative wire bug uses are the other new addition to your moveset that's been added in Monster Hunter Rise, which are the switch skills. These switch skills, like their name suggests, are the skills that can be switched out, providing a more personalized playstyle. Again, some of these skills can be traced back to earlier Monster Hunter titles, but here you have more freedom to mix and match what fits you. There are 3 different skills that can be switched out per weapon, normally 2 basic skills and 1 Silkbind skill. Some of the differences between these interchangeable skills can be as simple as a move hitting stronger but moving slower, or an attack approaching from a different angle, but others have the potential to change the entire way a weapon is managed. Going back to the bow, its constant stream of attacks is supplemented by a special extra mobile dash that keeps the arrow charge high and keeps you out of harm's way. You can switch this skill out for a dash that is instead a close-range attack, turning your at-a-distance stream of arrows into a close-range shootout where you're a breath from death at any given moment. Or look at the gun lance, which is a high-powered weapon that's normally restrained by its lack of mobility, but now you can switch the little charge shots it does to instead fire you off like a living cannonball, opening up some interesting and rather entertaining plays. The gameplay between the weapon-wielding hunters and the ferocious monsters is ultimately supplemented by where you fight. There are a number of different locales, like the overgrown ruins of an old massive shrine, a frosted wasteland with a damp cave system, or a desert with deep crevasses and buildings sinking in the sands. Each of these locales, and the specific arenas within them, each come with their own boons and hindrances. Some areas can have their own personal endemic life, which if utilized correctly can work heavily in your favor. There are different types of arena hazards like thermal vents or quicksands you might have to deal with, and nearby smaller monsters can roll up and decide to screw you over at any possible moment. You can also fight these monsters right outside the village in the new rampage battles, which is both a new mode and the key driving force behind the story, of which there isn't much of. The story could be summarized as you becoming a hunter, the rampage starting to appear, which for reference is when a large swarm of monsters start thrashing their way through a location. You then discover the cause for this rampage, defeat it, then realize that wasn't the cause the whole time. You then proceed to repeat that scenario twice. Even the completed ending, which was added after the game's release, doesn't give much closure to this series of events. And to be fair, Monster Hunter never really put much effort into the story. It was more to just set up the act of hunting monsters, which I suppose they succeeded at with this rampage theme. It was also a good opportunity for them to try out a different type of gameplay. Instead of a traditional locale and a traditional fight, the rampage battles put you right outside the village gates, where you then fend off the waves of monsters with a combination of Monster Hunter and tower defense gameplay. You put down constructs mounted by either you or the other villagers. There are traps and bombs to be placed. These things can be upgraded by defeating monsters and completing the random challenges posted at the start of each game. It might not be as interesting as normal hunts, but compared to the clumsy cannons and slow-paced fights Capcom tried in Worlds, this is a significant improvement. Also, the general vibe given off in this mode suggests it was intended to be more of a multiplayer experience. That's not to say it can't be done solo, but it will be a lot more taxing, especially at the higher difficulties. Oh, and as we're talking about it, you remember those times I said a direct comparison might be necessary? The multiplayer in this game has some problems. Not connection ones though. The only times I really experience lag or desync is in the communal item box, which is definitely the place I care about the least having those issues. The biggest downside I have with multiplayer in Rise is agency. And the funny thing here is I don't mean in the game, I mean in the menus. The way Monster Hunter World handled its partyless multiplayer was leaps and bounds a better system. For instance, let's say I want to find a game to join in Monster Hunter World. First, I get a slew of sorting functions with mission types, ranks, and monsters. Let's just say, for instance, I want to hunt a Rathalos. I pick the monster and am presented with a list of different quests from all available categories, each one with a Rathalos involved and people asking for assistance. From here, I can see each person's rank, so I could pick someone new and help them out, or pick someone experienced and get through it quickly. I can also see things like how long a quest has been active, and how many players are involved, and any special quirks a quest might have. Presented with all those options, I get to pick the one that suits me at that moment. But for Rise, things are a little different. Let's say I still want to hunt a Rathalos. Instead of having all those options, I go into the same menu I choose quests, pick only one, and simply wait and hope someone happens to have that quest active at this exact time. If they don't, oh well, it's my bad for choosing incorrectly, and things aren't much better from the other end. If I decide to start my own quest and call for help, no one can see that I have my quest active and decide to join. I have to hope someone decides to do a multiplayer search for my exact quest, or hope that the system places someone doing a random search gets dropped into my quest. In either direction, multiplayer is reliant on pure chance. This isn't the most common problem right now, but if Capcom keeps adding more and more quests, the harder it's going to get for this type of multiplayer connectivity to succeed. And the worst part is, I don't know if this change was intentional by Capcom, or because of Nintendo's online service having some abstract rules in place that prevent the same system from Monster Hunter World being reapplied. And there's also one other complaint I have with multiplayer. This one is in-game, however. In Monster Hunter World, much like Monster Hunter Rise, you can go into battle with your animal companions. These little palicos, and in Monster Hunter Rise, palamutes, who will help you out with special attacks and creative tools. But in Monster Hunter World, whenever there were 3 or 4 hunters in a quest, these creatures were left on the sidelines, ensuring there were never more than 4 entities involved in a hunt. Monster Hunter Rise throws that out the window. Now, everyone has one buddy with them at all times, and given you can't restrict how many people can join a hunt, you're always going to have 8 different things attacking the same monster all the time. And it's a chaotic mess that gets worse the smaller a monster is, to the point where you can't always tell what's going on. And in a game like this, you generally want to know. Also, and this is more of a PSA than a multiplayer issue, if you're not the host of the game, don't be capturing monsters. Monster Hunter's big gameplay loop is going into fights with monsters, defeating them, and using the materials gained from those fights to make new gear, like stronger weapons and armor. More specifically, you'll be creating builds based on the skills and resistances of each armor and the attack and elemental differences of each weapons. Each of these weapons and armors have specific crafting recipes, requiring certain parts of monsters. Now for those who played a lot of Monster Hunter World, capturing monsters is considered the best way to end a hunt, as it grants more materials than harvesting. But in Monster Hunter Rise, this is no longer the case. Not only that, but a new quality of life change now shows the drop tables for each individual material, with some parts having much lower drop rates for a captured monster. So going into a multiplayer quest and thinking you'll be doing someone a favor by capturing a monster could instead be depriving them of what they need. So do try and leave that decision up to the host whenever possible. The only other thing left to talk about is going to be the animations, ergo the other of the 2 videos I started on this channel. And the animations in Rise are good. Really good. The textures aren't so great, a significant downgrade from its immediate predecessor, but that's just the Switch limitations rearing their ugly head. The animations, though, Capcom has once again outdone themselves in this front. The flashy, over-exaggerated movements of your hunter and the NPCs, the ways you wield each weapon and use the new traversal types, the natural-looking movements of all the monsters and how they telegraph attacks or display changes in their behavior. Everything just has that layer of polish and fluidity that shows how much the animators care about their game. And while it doesn't always look the prettiest, much like the rest of the game, it will be enjoyable each and every time you play.